Hi, this is Sanjeev Chopra, and today we'll be talking about Pakistan and the Indian Ocean. Well, a growing number of countries are rolling out their national security policies, and Pakistan has become one of the latest to join this list. And in this, Pakistan has pipped India, it's ahead of us. And this document on Pakistan's national security policy breaks the mold of Pakistan's usual security roadmaps. And in many ways, one of the most interesting things is what it says about the Indian Ocean, specifically about its name. But first, let's understand the crucial role which a national security doctrine plays, where India currently stands on this front, and some of the most remarkable features about Pakistan's security policy document. Now, a question may well be asked, why do national security policies matter at all? Well, all the five permanent members of the UN Security Council, the US, Russia, China, UK, France, all these five have published their national security doctrines or policies and their follow-up strategy papers. Sometimes they even specify the number of years which will cover this particular policy. But in the last 2 years, three other countries which are not members of the UNSC, they've also published their strategy documents, and these include Germany, Japan, and Pakistan. Now, these documents provide a very useful insight into the security priorities and the objectives of these nations. And they go beyond the traditional concerns about territorial integrity. Under the earlier notion of what a nation state is, we were drawing from the Treaty of Westphalia. So it now encompasses a broader range of security challenges, including human security, cyber security, energy security, environmental security, because all of these have a major impact on lives, livelihoods, and value chain logistics in an increasingly interdependent world. It's also important to understand who is responsible for the making of the national security architecture of a country. Who's responsible for designing it? Who's responsible for defining it? In the case of China, it is the Chinese Communist Party, which is at the helm of this exercise. It's very clear that the entire security policy of China, the entire economic policy, everything is based on what the CPC would want, as the Communist Party of China would want. In the case of the USA, it is the Department of States. In Russia and France, the initiative is taken by the President's office. In the UK, it is the Cabinet which takes the call, which means it is not driven by the Prime Minister, but it's driven by the Cabinet office. In Pakistan, it is the Defense Ministry which is in the lead. In the case of India, which has yet to come out with its policy paper, and I must mention that it is only in the first week of November, in fact, November 6th, specifically, that the National Security Council Secretariat, which is under the PMO, has been tasked with collecting relevant information from all the ministries, departments, and the state governments, which are, especially those which are on the border, to come out with a national security strategy. And in India, this whole process was started by Dhanil Sen Brajesh Mishra, a very powerful bureaucrat who combined in himself the role of the principal advisor to the Prime Minister, principal secretary to the Prime Minister, Vajpayee, and also the NSA. Now, this NSA will be the foundational document. It'll be providing the guiding principles in security, foreign policy, trade, investment, science, technology, and everything else that that is important for the nation, because now we talk about comprehensive national security. And this document is also important because it tells us to what extent can we securitize ourselves. Because in the case of China, everything is security related, but there are costs to this. So the national strategy national strategy document also tells us to what extent can a democracy go insofar as securitizing its interests are concerned. But the topic for today and the topic which fascinated me was, in the 80s when I worked as a journalist, there was a lot of concern about what Pakistan, how Pakistan would define India and the Indian Ocean. One thing always has been that Pakistan has been rather peeved about the fact that we call ourselves India, because they felt that after 47, it should have been Hindustan stroke Bharat and Pakistan, and after 1971, much to their reluctance, Bangladesh came up. In fact, the Britishers also wanted to call ourselves Hindustan, or we wanted to call ourselves Bharat. But when we called ourselves India, this means that we became the country which represented the entire subcontinent. And we are also the only country in the world which has an ocean named after. And Pakistan has not always been, because now in the new security policy doctrine, they've called it the Indian Ocean. And the NSP of Pakistan has also talked about many things. They've talked about comprehensive national security. They've talked about human rights. They've talked about rule of law. They've talked about gender justice. And in fact, as Dr. Rabia Akhtar of the Atlantic Council has said, this is the first time any NSP in Pakistan has taken a comprehensive approach to security, anchoring its drift in human security and to achieve economic security. Whether it is about securing a citizen's constitutional privilege or about protecting a regular Pakistani from all forms of extremism, crime, terrorism, and violence, including war, the new NSP covers it all. And Akhtar, one must mention, is also the director of the Center for Security, Strategy and Policy Research at the University of Lahore. Dr. Akhtar also noted that this was the first time gender security, encompassing structural violence to workplace inequality, has found a mention in the NSP. And actually, the NSP does not reflect an obsession with India to the extent it used to be till the last decade or till a few years ago. True, any NSP which is generated in Pakistan will talk about the CPEC corridor, the economic benefits of that corridor. It will talk about Kashmir. It will talk about Hindutva politics and the threat which Hindutva politics and an assertive India will have on the neighborhood. It will talk about how SARC is not done as well and many other things. But the important point is that apart from the three times that it refers to India in the policy document, it calls the Indian Ocean as the Indian Ocean. Because in the 80s, when I was a journalist, there was a big debate on whether Indian Ocean will be called Indian Ocean, or Pakistan wanted it to be called the Afro-Asian Ocean. And it once took up the matter to the Organization of Islamic Countries and said that why don't we call it the Muslim Ocean, because most of the states which are next to the Indian Ocean are Muslim states. So all sorts of things were done. In fact, in 1971, there were big presentations made in Washington, D.C. by Mr. Sherwani, a distinguished member of the Pakistani elite, who said that it should not be called the Indian Ocean. But fortunately for us, the last 3 decades or 4 decades have made it quite clear that India is the dominant power, India is the dominant force in the region, and therefore we become the only country which has an ocean after its name. And the fact that it's also been acknowledged by Pakistan is something which is really remarkable. And this is an interesting facet of history, which I thought I'll share with the readers and the listeners of print. Thank you.